just going to open things up with gratitude, as we always should open everything up. First of all, thanking Okwui for the idea of this particular platform, and thanking Danspace for making it possible. And in the background, thanking Yolanda, who is our resident wizard, and Seta, who is keeping us in line. So the other thing is that you're seeing me, I'm Tina Campt, and Simone Leigh, and Okwui Okpokwasili, as well as a box that says Saidiya Hartman, who unfortunately lost her voice, but is so eager to still be in conversation with us that she's a box who's chatting with us, and we're going to really enjoy sharing her thoughts and bringing her into the conversation, even if it's not her face and voice. So the other thing I wanted to actually thank you for, Okwui, is the idea of utterances from the chorus as exactly what we needed before we knew how much we really needed it. You know what I mean? That, you know, I was reading the description of it again as a platform that is first and foremost about community, and about helping us to think differently about what kinship, community, and care look like. And kinship, community, and care are exactly what we need right now. So in that spirit, we're trying to continue the conversation that we couldn't have in Danspace by doing it virtually. And so I guess I want to start out our conversation, because that's what this is really about. It's just a conversation, by sort of saying the obvious, which is that we were supposed to be physically together in proximity, sharing and thinking about kinship, thinking about connection, thinking about intimacy. And the world has changed since we last gathered, and we're not able to gather right now. The word gather has been completely transformed because we're forced to gather without being in physical contact. And so we started, you know, a moment ago thinking about, or I actually put that question out to you guys to actually ask you to think about what gathering means now under the current circumstances. And in what ways are we having to reinvent that term and what it means? Because we have to gather to survive. We can't not gather to survive. And in response to that, Simone did what Simone always does, which is to offer us an image. So Simone, say something about the image and why you put it on the screen, and we can sort of talk through it.
Well, Amy Saul posted this morning. She has a project called Sunu Journal, which I think was, which I'm not sure what stage it's in right now, which soon may become a periodical or not. But it's a photograph of a group that I wasn't aware of called the Sisterhood. In 1977, and it has June Jordan, who I've been a little bit, obsessed with now. I apologize, everyone. I'm very much a Luddite, and I'm not necessarily going to be good at sharing. But anyway, Louise Merriweather, Verda May, Smart Governor, Alice Walker, Audrey Edwards, Toni Morrison, all in the same photo. And my favorite part is I'm pretty sure that's Betsy Smith in a photograph on the wall. It's an incredible photo. I'm just like, thrilled to see it.
Saidiya, I just want to bring in what Saidiya had written on her chat. Is I knew about the group. Toni talked about the support provided by other Black women writers and single mothers. So glad to be here. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's about, you know, making spaces that were never offered to us, right? Where Black women have always had to decide what gathering means under, you know, the constraints, right, of either being made invisible or never being allowed to take up space, or being told that you're not supposed to take up space. Okay, what's gathering mean to you right now?
I mean, I think this photo is like incredibly emblematic of what we were trying to do from Utterances of the Chorus. On top of it, being in relationship to Bessie Smith, being in relationship to, an ancestor, a spiritual ancestor, a cultural ancestor. And I think that a lot of what we were doing when we were trying to make this space for this kind of group creative project, this group improvisational project, to suggest that when you come together and try to make things together, you start to build new avenues of kinship. And in Sitting on a Man's Head, we were asking the question of folks, what do you carry, and how in turn does that carry you? And I think that this picture, this image, is so emblematic of what these women are carrying, how they carry each other forward, but also this being in proximity to Bessie Smith is also about like, okay, we carry you as well. And I feel like, Simone, you also were doing that for me in the chorus, that installation that you have at RISD, where we're listening to Nancy Elizabeth Prophet, right? So we're being in relationship to her and her thinking and her work and what she's going through, and you're carrying it forward, right, into this larger chorus. And just the way they're so close to each other, right? Having to bend, sit, be near each other. The way, is that June Jordan? Who's Toni Morrison? Is this June Jordan? This is June Jordan?
And Toni Morrison.
And Toni Morrison, and look
killing.
at Toni Morrison, always killing, but look at her, look at her, the way, she leans. And even in the walk, we were saying people may have to lean on each other. So lean. And obviously, Toni Morrison, as an editor, was also responsible for making this space for voices that had been marginalized, sidelines, to be heard, right? A platform. And I just, it kind of makes me, looking at this photo makes me kind of want to weep.
But also it makes me so happy just to look at Zaki right there.
So
lean, lean in to get her grin in there, to like show her joy. Yeah. Oh my God, it's just she's just shining there, and it's mostly about it to me. Okay, I'm reading into it, but this is what I want to see. Is I'm going to show my joy at being in this group of women. Right? So I'm just going to bring Saidiya in, because she said, what's so hard about the present moment is not being able to gather in ways that have sustained us. Our creative, spiritual, aesthetic, and political projects have been enabled by coming together. In this community, they nurtured each other's dreams. It's true. It's nurturing dreams. Like, that's what we do with one another. But that's what we're trying to keep doing. I'm with you. It's like, that's the challenge of not being in physical proximity, is not being able to lean in, to not be able to hug, not to be able to embrace, not to be able to just give somebody a pat on the back or hold their hand. And that we're struggling across this physical, chasm.
Right.
To actually be able to do what Zaki and what June Jordan and Toni Morrison are doing. The other thing about it is they're in coats. I kind of love the fact.
You think like the end of the, are they wearing fur coats? That's what Saidiya just asked. Some of them are.
Yes, they are.
Fake or fun or whatever.
Looks like fur and leather.
There's an obvious attempt to look fly in the photo.
But you know what?
That's not casual.
But it makes me think it's like the end of the night. They've had a great time. Is it June Jordan's house, whoever's house it is? And people are like, okay, we got to go. And they're like, wait a minute, we got to get a photo. And some people have their coats. Like that. You know what I mean? It's like it's the end of, and like Intizaki's so happy, like, it's just they've been filled or something. Right. But it's time to go. But they're like, yeah, let me do this photo, and I love this lady.
The other thing that you two were just talking about in terms of gathering and proximity, when you talked about, when you mentioned Simone's chorus, your installation up at RISD, where we're seated, what you do is it's in the museum, and you're looking at these sort of artifacts, these classical art artifacts, and you have to make a place to sit and listen. And I know the one I'm most familiar with is the one in front of the sculpture, where you're on on a seat. You have to get comfortable because it's a long reading, and you have to sort of get comfortable in that space and with those voices, and the way in which those voices, once you start taking it in, it's a physical experience of listening. It's about letting their voices penetrate you and letting what they're saying penetrate you. And I was saying the other day that that's one of the ways of gathering that I have now, is that even though Zoom has become this way for me to see and hear people, I need to have my earbuds in, and I need to be able to have voices in me physically. That listening, I just need that. I'm trying to create that kind of contact with voices and with sound, so that that's as close as I can possibly get, is to have you in my head. And I feel like we're struggling for that, in the same way that that Saidiya mentioned about what does coming together mean when you can't physically be in each other's spaces.
Right.
And I feel like I've been a listener for a long time, but listening has gotten to taken on a whole other dimension now. How about you guys?
Well, I'm very, very much terrorized by this climate that we're in right now. And one of the horrors I feel right now around this idea of not being able to gather and just being separated and supported in different ways is the kind of class terror, the way I'm so supported and protected and other people are not.
Yeah.
Is really, has really been horrifying to think about. I keep on wondering what's happening with the homeless population in New York, for example. And I heard that LA Mocha fired half of its staff on Friday.
No.
And so I feel like the class divisions that are in such high relief right now have really upset me in a way where I realize, yeah, it's different when this becomes a life and death situation.
Well, there are apparently, what it's been reported, 3 million people who filed for unemployment, right? This is a huge, unprecedented number. And you're right, it's not accounting for like homeless folks, homeless families, people who already were so housing insecure, already food insecure. And I'm wondering too, what happens when this is all, if it is all somehow the curve is flattened and we're all done, and we have to kind of try to be next to each other again, try to be in some kind of proximity to each other. What are the fears that are going to be so difficult to allay? And then it's not going to just be about kind of whatever fears about bodily intrusion or some kind of infection, but it is going to be like, what is the state that people are going to be in if for 3 or 4 months they have barely had food, they haven't been housed, they're sick? Like, I mean, it's true. It's just like, are we at a place where we're talking like there will be a reason for people to rise up in a way that has not been, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just wondering.
I mean, I'm feeling like I know what you're talking about, and part of it for me is when we are able to come back together and gather, will we trust each other? Do you know what I mean? Because what this moment has been doing is creating this sense of absolute distrust, like anybody could infect you. right? And so we are being pushed in this position where we're supposed to be suspicious of contact, of encounter. And I mean, I hear you, Simone, because what I keep thinking about is, what about people who are having to shelter in place with abuse in abusive families or in abusive partnerships? What does it mean to actually not be able to get out and to have to navigate space with somebody who you're afraid of, who might hurt you? And that, you know, I think you're absolutely right, Okwui. Like, what kind of sociality will we have once the state of emergency has passed, and how will it have changed us? I want to bring Saidiya back in. She's writing, the violence of capitalism is on full display. It's a system driven by profit to the exclusion of all else. We need to create another set of arrangements. The crisis is so severe, not because people are sick, but because capitalist medicine can't take care of us.
Exactly. Capitalist medicine is about, it's exclusionary, right? And I think we're seeing, when we see politicians, particularly right-wing politicians, now talking about, well, if I were, you know, I'm 60 something and I'm willing to sacrifice myself for the good of the economy. You know, Lieutenant Governor, was it in Texas? Who who suggested that, you know, he would be willing to die, grandparents should be willing to die, for the health of the economy. um, and it's, I mean, not to the fact is that it's not only grandparents and it's not only older people who are dying, and not even only immunosuppressed people, but it is the height of I mean, maybe, or the truth of capitalism is, it's either life, um, it's either the health of the body or the health of capital, right? Like, I mean, there's something, I mean,
Yeah,
help me out here. Like, it's becoming
absolutely.
really clear that that's how, that the system is framed this way by what we might call the titans of capital right now. That
Right.
they have always understood that the tension, that there will always be bodies sacrificed, but now it's, sorry, and so
Now it's, I mean, it's exactly what Saidiya said, is that it's on full display, is that, you know, the choice about a stimulus package, not even the stimulus package, the choice that is so clear to President Trump is, either we're going to have we're going to open up, you know, our economy to get back on track, or people are going to die. And it's like, well, actually, let's open up our economy and let people die.
That's right. It's people are gonna die, right? And I think Saidiya also added to what she said, Tina.
The calculus of death is openly embraced. Yeah,
That's right.
exactly it. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's amazing, right? Because you would think, and I think there are healthcare workers or Dr. Fauci, you know, people who are saying, wait a minute. If people are dying, there is possibly the economy is going to crash even more, right? If we don't get healthcare workers, and we don't get people who are on the front lines, and it's so interesting, right, that essential workers are now also, I mean, there was some article, they said, we're realizing that some of the essential workers of this system are the lowest paid workers, right? Are the least secure workers, those folks working at grocery stores, these folks who are taking, you know, I'm trying to think, I'm just thinking delivery folks, or
yeah.
car, you know, people who are driving Ubers and Lyfts. And it's so interesting because you would think, wait a second, if people get sick and the healthcare system crashes and it gets like, you know what I mean? So it's interesting that I would think, I don't know, is there a healthy capitalist model? And I, you know, like, but even though it's not the one we're living in, that you can't think that actually if I don't know, if 2 million people get sick and die, that, don't you, I mean, that's not going to have some impact? Or are you going to sort of, are these folks going to shelter in place in their bunkers and somehow still be running the world? I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, that's, I mean, I think that what you're talking about is the sort of the self-defeating, the self-defeating engine of capital is that it runs on consumption even when it's consuming itself, right? Because that's what we're talking about now. Is
Runs
that,
on consumption even when
right?
it's
Is it?
consuming itself.
Yeah, it's consuming the people who are supposed to be, running it, right? So without those folks, it can't work. But it's willing to sacrifice those folks in order to potentially keep going. But that's not going to happen. I mean, that's the trade-off that we're facing right now, and I hope that people are going to resist that, at least resist the rhetoric of it, because the rhetoric of it is self-defeating.
That's right.
And I don't know anybody who thinks it's not self-defeating.
Right. It's not just strange, right? Liberty University opened up its classes, right? And I think that the head of Liberty University said, we're getting a great response, but out of 15,000 people, 1,700 showed up. Do you know what I mean? And is that a great response? And it's so interesting. Like, I just feel like there's also a way in which things have been, there are these framing devices that are in place that continually kind of tell us, I mean, it's clearly 1984. They keep telling us, or people are saying things that are the absolute opposite of what's actually happening.
Right.
Or the fact that in some polls, President Trump's approval rating and of how he's is 60% right now. So
It's not
getting some of his, it's not?
Not 60%.
Who am I listening to?
I think there might
right
be
here.
60% of Republicans. But yeah, but he's...
It was always pretty high with Republicans, though.
Yeah. But I mean, again, I can't even.
Yeah, no, it's yes, that's too much to bear. But I do think that I'm wondering if this crisis, what is this crisis going to open up and reveal? What is the potential around, as Saidiya said, listening to folks who are openly embracing and debating this calculus of death? Mm-hmm. I mean, the irony is that Sarah Palin talked about the death panels of Barack Obama. I think a lot of people have been talking about that. Mm-hmm. But if these folks who are essential workers and they see that they are being sacrificed in this calculus, there are more of them, right? Mm. What happens? What happens when they are fully mobilized, and when we're all mobilized in as allies of those folks to say no? Oh, sorry, Saidiya.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's true. And I just wanted to add that when you asked about what is it going to reveal, there is a way in which the lockdown is allowing sort of the ruling elite to think that people are silent. Right? And that, if the first thing that's going to happen is today when the new unemployment numbers are released, and they may have just been released, when they actually are going to get a number of how many people have literally lost their jobs, who are still on lockdown. The other thing that's going to happen is that, once it's over, that's when they start. I mean, that's one of the reasons the stimulus package is happening, is so that they can actually say they did something before people actually can register the harm. And the harm is going to be profound. So Saidiya wanted to say, folks are risking their lives. Grocery clerks, delivery people, hospital workers, nurses, and doctors are risking their lives every day. The madness of the ruling elite is that they believe they can survive pandemics and climate catastrophe while the rest of us die. And I mean, that's exactly the logic of, fungibility and expendability and disposability. Is that, those who are making these decisions feel like they are not going to be affected by them, feel like they can survive, and everyone else is expendable. And so in that way, but the scale of it, I mean, that's what they're talking about now, is that it surpasses anything. So the maximum jobless numbers during the 2008 financial crisis was 620-some thousand. And they're saying, and that was over the course of it. And they're saying 3 million last week. 3 million people lost their jobs last week. But I think that the that the extremes that both that Simone and Saidiya are pointing out are really important, because it was something I was thinking about when I was preparing for this conversation, when we were originally supposed to talk about slowness and slowing down, and how has this shut down forced us into a different, a different modality of being, where we're having to struggle with lack of structure, the lack of the things that we usually do, right? Lack of, and lack of the urgency that we normally might feel. So that's one thing. That's for those of us who are shut in, who can't or is not supposed to go anywhere. And the exact opposite is happening for exactly all those that sphere of people that Saidiya is talking about. Hospital workers, delivery people, grocery clerks, nurses, anybody in healthcare, right? That they are being asked to work nonstop now, right? Nonstop. There's no slowness at all. There's just intensity of always.
Or a modality of slowness for the people who are staying at home sick because they're not sick enough to require the ICU beds, but they're either home alone or with a caregiver who is trying to meticulously clean every surface, monitor the amount of oxygen they're taking in or holding in their blood, monitor how high the fever is going, and just to be with them as they struggle, but they're not completely on the precipice of life and death and don't need a ventilator to breathe, but they're just, do you know what I mean? Like, what is that kind of, that's another modality that's happening as well, that's invisible. Or folks, I mean, I was talking to my sister who is a child psychiatrist, but works in the hospital system in Boston. And she was talking about people who have tumors, who, they might have malignant tumors and they have to postpone those essential surgeries. Or what happens if you're having a cardiac arrest or heart arrhythmia? There are all of those folks too who are also have other acute conditions that are in a state of wait. And it's I mean, obviously, I can barely conceive of it all, but in the context of the slow walk and the space of trying to collectively make a song together, a song that includes the dissonance, the assonance, that is a song of agreement and disagreement. That was asking for also a presence, also, how to be with yourself, but be with others closely, and make things. And it was so, it feels like the halcyon days or something,
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to reconcile this. I'm trying to reconcile the non-stopness that's being demanded of so many people on the one hand, and the slow downness that's being demanded at the same time of many of us as well. The sort of stop, shelter in place, slow it all down, take it all down, and the do not stop under any circumstances. The idea added another group of people that we should think about. Construction workers are still building luxury houses in New York City. They too are considered essential, as one man said, essential to the profit schemes of developers. And so again, that notion of who is essential and who is expendable, right? That's what's clashing right now. And there's one thing to me about slowness that I think is really important, which is that, and I've been thinking about it in sort of some of the writing that I've been doing through the work of dance and performance theorist André Lepecki. And he has this wonderful description of slowness as what he calls not only a question of kinetics, but also of intensities, of generating an intense field of micro-perceptions.
Yes.
So it's not just about movement, it's about literally the intensification of all forms of perception down to this really tiny, minute level.
Yes,
And
yes.
so what happens if we actually mobilize slowness, right? So
Right.
like, what would happen if those folks like construction workers were to slow it
Slow
down,
down. That's
right?
right. That's right.
Right? How can we exploit that on the one end to sort of slow down capital from exploiting so many people,
Mm.
and at the same time to like be able to ramp it up for ourselves, to be able to perceive more, connect more, right?
And
And not
that's
go against it.
and that's what I think the work of artists, performance folks, like the people that are now also gig workers who have lost jobs, who don't know where income is coming in, but they are the ones, right, who are those in a way they're also caretakers
Yeah.
of a kind of condition and of a kind of space. They're the ones I feel like I could go to be working with the construction workers or working with folks and being like, okay, let's do some breath work and let's slow it down. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there would be all of these possible intersections
Yeah.
of I love that. If the construction workers, how to get the construction workers to slow down and let's employ all of the somatic workers, the cultural workers, the performance workers.
I don't know how to stop that.
I
I don't know how to not make one device talk to the other and all of them call me at once. I'm sorry. Slow it down.
I know, slow down. But yes, like how do we mobilize, like find these intersections and these points of connection between these workers these workers in different modes and genres? How do we get them to come together?
Simone, I want to ask you about that question, because one of the things like that you are so amazing at doing is bringing people together. And I mean, that's what you do. And what does that, how might we use this moment to actually slow down, to connect, and slow down to create a practice of care that's, you know, at the very minimum checking in, right? And to do it through artistic practices. I mean, you've always been a model to me for doing that.
Thank you. Well, I guess, I mean, the moment that we're in is kind of making this even more intense for me. But I think for a long time, as my career has grown, I've been trying to mitigate how, you know, when we talk about how the elite is protected, I feel like how do we, I mean, we as Black women right now are really the elite that we're talking about.
Mm.
And how are we going to mitigate that and continue to, you know, fight the power when we're, you know, part of the power structure at this point. And what I've tried to do at each stage is to open a platform at the very least, where other women who have supported my work or who I feel like have led the way can also, you know, collaborate with me at different, you know, stages.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's become important because I feel like there's, you know, even we didn't know about this photograph. I didn't know about the sisterhood this morning, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm spent a lot of time studying these people, you know?
Yeah.
And so the extent of our ignorance is really shocking to me. It goes on and on and on. I just found out about a Buckminster Fuller, June Jordan collaboration like last month.
Right.
So I think there's still a lot of work to be done in just sharing information and understanding, getting to really know our history and how we have always been, you know, doing this work for so many years. And that's why I've been so appreciative of Saidiya's, giving us some tools and some ideas of how we can bring this knowledge forward, or how the knowledge could be produced about what's happened to us and how we got here. And so I've been thinking about that, but I've never been in a situation where I felt so protected that I'm going to stay alive and other people are going to die.
Mm.
And I am just really trying to hold myself together here. I mean, that's what I've been doing for the last, however 2 weeks we've been inside. I really, and I was also thinking when you were talking about slowness, and the theorist that was talking about how it has to do with being able to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And, as lately what I've done in terms of supporting my work in the studio is to hire more people to do more of the extraneous work so that I can have this very monastic, complete focus on what I'm doing. And there has been this kind of need, this desire to create space and time, and in order to, there's this, Rashida has this expression that she learned from her dance teacher in DC, and I think is applicable here, is that when you're an artist, you want to get to this space and this kind of, at least for me, I have to get to a place when I'm working where I can go full out, what we call full out. And it's such a privilege to be able to create that space for yourself. And I found that it's taken many years and a lot of money to get to the place where I can create a space of slowness for myself. And now I'm like, at this point, I'm wondering, how can I ethically go forward? How do I stop, participating in the system in such a, I feel so complicit in the situation we are in now. So I don't really have a lot of answers, unfortunately. I'm just still have a lot of questions.
But
but I'm trying to be conscious, of especially the class divisions have just been so high relief right now. I just really feel very devastated about it.
Simone, one of the points that you're making that's so important, though, I love when you said artists getting to a space where you can go full out, which is slowness doesn't necessarily have to be the goal, right? But it's where it allows you to marshal the resources you need to go full out, or for us to face all the shit that we're having to face, right?
Yeah.
And go full out against it. Saidiya had two things. First of all, she said, I want to work full out. But also one of the points she made earlier that got lost in between is slowing down as a modality of shirking and striking, which is part of what her work gives us the evidence for how powerful that can be, the power of the general strike, the power of shirking and not going along and not accepting, not accepting baseline, right? So I think that we need to also think about slowness as a bridge, right, towards realizing other capacities for connection that will allow us to go full out. Do you know what I mean? But I also think it's important to recognize, and okay, that goes back to Sitting on a Man, how uncomfortable slowing down or slowness can be. And when you were describing about the experience that, being slow in proximity evokes, or was meant to evoke, I have to say, so Simone, you actually, I'm sure you saw it in Berlin, was my first encounter at the Berlin Biennale with Sitting on a Man. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying to walk into that space. And it was terrifying to like be so vulnerable, because that's what it does, is it makes you vulnerable to, you know, your own feelings of intimacy with strangers, proximity to strangers. I have to say, I could not enter the space this time around because talk about intensity, you ramped it up to this like level that to me was overwhelming. It was, you know, it was overwhelming because of the sheer number of people in the space.
Yeah.
And also because of sort of the motion of the structure. And another thing that I noticed is, and for those of you who didn't see it, is that I don't know if it was a smaller space, but the walls, so to speak, weren't opaque. They were translucent. And so the opaqueness of it this time, I looked at it and I was like, I can't go there.
You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's
I
happening.
don't, yeah. And it's like, and literally, I don't know. And it was a challenge to me, because I remember the experience of slow walking as transformative in a lot of ways, like really feeling every part of my foot, like individually, every surface on my foot, feeling what it meant for air to hit me, you know, from somebody else's movement.
Breath and movement.
And breath, yeah. And to just sort of be able to navigate at a space of hovering. And to also sort of try and identify, it was absolutely the micro perceptions. Where is this sound coming from? Right? Who is so close to me? You know, that kind of stuff. So I was like, oh my God, this time around was so intense. And I was just curious about what people have told you about their experience in that space.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have to shout out to Peter Bourne, who created Peter, my partner, who created the structure, designed the structure, and designed it so that there were, you know, we want to talk about labor. There were actually 4 people at the top of the platform. There are 4 people moving this entire structure. I'm not
really.
Yes.
They
were taking shifts.
I was looking at it.
No, they were taking shifts. So it was almost like a sail in a way, right? And the thing that was different about Berlin and this was that we made it entirely enclosed, because we really wanted to protect this practice of slowness, this practice of uttering, from being you know, gazed upon, from being a kind of from being some interesting specular kind of experience. There is no audience. There was no audience. And so if you're inside, you know, if you want to see what happens, you have to go inside and go through the process. Or you could stay outside, because I completely respect that some people are not ready and may not and may have no interest in engaging in that slowness with that many people. And it's true, we did have more people this time who are artist activators, so a shout out to them for holding down the space, anchoring the space, and sitting with people and talking about the things that are carried and the things that individuals carry, and how does it continue to carry them, and then going into the space and shouting and crying and singing. Like, I mean, the experience was so, for me, I don't know, it was so changing, you know. I did not know what to expect, even though the activators, we had sonic tools that we worked with, you know, particular strategies that we worked with when we were thinking about making sound. But I think that what I heard from people was that came into the space, they something shifted for them,
Mm.
you know? Sometimes people would come in, stay for a little while, and some people would come in and stay for, you know, 4-hour practice. Some people would come in and stay for 2 hours. They would come in and not leave, or they would come in, leave, and then come back. Sometimes there was a young girl, Omar Barada's, a curator, a cultural worker, a writer, a teacher. He has 2 young girls, and they came in, and his older girl, I think she was 11, and she stayed with us, right? We
Mm.
talked about singing love in, I think, 3 different languages. I think it was French, English, and I'm not remembering another language, Arabic, I think.
Mm.
And so that was the thing that she carried, and also carried the thing that she carried with her into the space, and that carries her along. And so she was in the space singing this with us. You know, I mean, anyway, it was.
It sounds so beautiful.
It was shifting all of the time. And then I thought about the riot section. Remember the part in Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, about the women banging on their cells, you know, this a riot of song. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the exact language for it, but sometimes it felt like that in the space, right? It felt like this roiling riot. There's these sounds that people finally were giving themselves permission to do
Like,
in
right.
public. Sonic riot, thank you.
Right.
You know, that they were giving themselves permission and then finding support. And you know what I mean? In some ways, then they were like leading the song. Anyway, sorry.
I mean, it's also sounds like, you know, what your installation, Loophole of Retreat, Loophole of Retreat 1, sonic protection, right?
Yeah.
So how do you create sonic protection? So our behind the scenes wizards have told me that we should wrap up, and I'm really excited because, as we know, this is recorded and we're going to have the opportunity to continue the conversation with folks online a little bit later. So for now, let's just wrap up and thank each other. Oh, wait a minute.
Wait, so
Saidiya wants to add one more thing. It was so intense the first time in Berlin. The word that really comes to mind for me is gravity, to really experience the gravity of the body in space. Tina, do you have something to say about movement, motion, and gravity? I do, but I'm going to do it later. So that we can save some time for a conversation. But maybe that's where we'll start when we get together online later this evening. So, okay, we're going to wrap up.
Thank you so much, Simone and Tina and Saidiya and Yolanda and Seta and Danspace and everyone. But that's all I wanted to say. Sorry, I interrupted.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Okwui, for your beautiful work. Thank you, Tina. See you guys later.
See you later. Okay, bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.